Top and bottom, up and down. Really, I would start with getting rid of these 6 archmages you have. In the name of the Divine Order, how are you meant to get anything done when negotiating with the realms at all, when such discordance is at the heart of your approach? The fussy minister pushed its pince-nez up one of its 7 long noses, if noses they could be called, and they immediately began to slowly slide down another of its thin trunks. Of course, you could easily solve this by eliminating all of them but the Archmage of Day. Why, they could still be in charge of liaising with the other realms, lower down the lattice, as it were, but it wouldn't all be so messy. Amos sighed. When the civil service had selected him to liaise with the servants of the Argent Mantra, he hadn't expected them to be quite so monofocused. He looked at the figure before him, dressed in layered robes enlaced with crystals, its face a strange construction of 4 eyes atop a mass of 7 short trunks. The minister, 2nd class, 9th clade, the respected Aphos Mu, it had said its name was. I really think we're getting away from the point. I don't think we are at all. Aphos Mu raised a long, multi-jointed, lecturing finger. The matter of the Omnihedron is, like all matters, one of governance. Loyalty can only flow from clear, strong governance, and the predictable change you desire can come only from that loyalty being harmonious in nature. Do I need to read once more from my treatises on the subject? Amos assured it this would not be necessary. It had already spent much of the morning doing just that, quoting its own interminably dense text in a surprisingly annoying sing-song voice. Look, if you won't consider a single archmage, why not 2? Mortals like that kind of simple symmetry, don't you? It said this in the tone of a parent admonishing a stubborn child. An archmage of triumph for day, summer and autumn, and an archmage of adversity for winter, spring and, night, I suppose. With this proposed omnihedral order you've suggested, one of them would be in charge for half the cycle and the other half. It's quite a nice idea, isn't it? Amos agreed that it was quite a nice idea, but that it still had nothing much to do with the problems of the omnihedron itself. Well, none so cursed as those who will not hear. The pince-nez reached the end of their current trunk again. All right, well, start from the top. Never let it be said that Aphos Mu wasn't themselves willing to listen. Why don't you share some of your own theories, and I'll tell you what the problems with those are? Amos sighed once more. What would a Vigilana teach? He thought to himself, holding the exemplar's icon that sat across his neck. Patience. Patience and moving forward. He looked up and prepared to speak once more. He had to believe that they'd get there. He did believe that they would get there. Eventually. Overview. In response to the casting of Bright Eyes Gleam in the Depths, the Turning Mirror offered to send heralds to every corner of the Empire to gather information about a problem or situation named by the Imperial Conclave. If the Throne of the Sun discovered any way that the stated dilemma might be addressed or resolved, then its hierarchs would present their findings. Perhaps fittingly, the Conclave chose the Omnihedron itself. Isa Sijin, the Imperial Magus, raised the declaration asking the Wheel of Light to consider the matter of how the damage and detrimental effects of the Empire-wide rituals that have been cast towards the Omnihedron can be fixed, in particular the blood-red roads, and speculate on the result of completing the Omnihedron. With the Conclave's blessing, the servants of the Turning Mirror have been free to roam the Empire, seeking answers to one of the greatest questions of magic. 1,000 motes of light scatter across the land in search of order. At the same summit, partly in response to concerns from several quarters, the Conclave elected to interdict all Empire-wide enchantments. But if the Wheel of Light can furnish the Empire with answers, perhaps the power of the Omnihedron might yet be harnessed safely. There is no light that does not cast a shadow, not even the illumination that streams from the throne of the sun. It would seem that the Turning Mirror is not the only being interested in the Omnihedron, but more of that later. What is known? Urizeni magicians have long understood that the magic of the realms can exert a powerful mental influence over those who fall under its sway, An autumn ritual might make someone greedy and avaricious, while a winter ritual made them morose and disdainful. It is often assumed that the more powerful the enchantment, the more powerful the influence. While that can be true, it is more accurate to say that the higher the magnitude of the effect, the more far-reaching and consequential those resonances can become. Nowhere is this more true than if the focus of the enchantment is a key node, since any resonance will quickly cause adjacent nodes to reverberate in sympathy. In practical terms, there is no enchantment more powerful than those that are cast on the entire Empire, and many stargazers argue that the Empire is the anchor stone that lies at the very centre of the net of the heavens, joining all others. The result is that if one casts an Empire-wide enchantment, the resonance of the realm can have unpredictable and far-reaching effects. Something will definitely happen, but it can be impossible to know what. This can be confounding to many magicians because most ritual magic is eminently predictable. The ritual defines exactly what it will accomplish. Sabina of the Endless Beacon, a well-respected stargazer and teacher, often uses the example of a spinning top to illustrate this contradiction. When the top is spinning, we know with absolute certainty that it will eventually cease spinning and fall to the ground. This is well understood, and yet we have never found any prognostication anywhere in the day realm that can answer the simplest of all questions. Which way will the top fall when it stops spinning? In some senses, the omnihedron is an attempt to resolve this mystery, to identify what the resonances might be and to prevent those that are harmful. The hope is that if the right rituals could be created, and then cast in the right order, then it would be possible for the entire Empire to benefit from one great enchantment after another, without either risk or ruin. All that is needed for that to happen is for the turning mirror to help the Empire solve the single greatest mystery of magic known to mortal minds. Once you know which way the spinning top will fall, everything else is child's play. A circular conversation. Somewhat regrettably, much of the advice provided by the turning mirror turns out to be of dubious value. There are 1,000 conversations all across the Empire between heralds of the Argent Mantra and Imperial magicians, but arguably they reveal more about the Eternal than they do about the Omnihedron. The first revelation of that which holds the sun in place is their firmly expressed view that the Urizen theory of the Omnihedron is flawed because it relies on the other realms. The ministers of the turning wheel claim that the influences of the other 5 realms are simply too chaotic, too unpredictable, and too injurious to progress and stability to form part of the Omnihedron. Any attempt to use a realm other than day will inevitably be flawed, because those realms are flawed. The day realm is the only one that encompasses the possibility of perfection. Since the Omnihedron is by some definitions a quest for perfection, it logically follows that it should primarily utilize day magic. Sinokinon's proposal is that the Empire should direct all their resources to the creation of a set of great day rituals, each explicitly combining 2 or more of the primary resonances of the day realm: divination, revelation, mastery, perfection, focus, and force. Blending different resonances should make it possible to create different enchantments. A degree of experimentation would then be needed to identify the right sequence of these rituals, as well as the duration. As the Eternal points out, there is no inherent reason why one of the rituals should only be used once. Perhaps it should be cast every season for a year, or perhaps a decade or more, before moving on to the next. It is clear that Sinokinon's heralds have some difficulty comprehending the idea that this approach might yield problems. The most recent casting of Bright Eyes Gleam in the Depths made art and artistic expression more difficult, shattered shrouds, and saw workers' wages rising permanently across the Empire. Most Imperial magicians see these side effects as deeply troubling, but that view is not shared by Sinokinon. It proves impossible to convince their heralds that these effects are in any way detrimental. As Ragged Ann, one of the Ashil landskeepers, puts it, "We asked a Day Eternal about magic, and to answer were to cast more day magic. In other news, water is wet and pigs like mud. The Turning Mirror's other suggestion is equally self-referential. According to the Wheel of Light, the key challenge of the Omnihedron is the inherent unpredictability of the magic. However, Unity is adamant that this is nothing to do with the magic. Day magic represents absolute order. The problem is the target of the ritual. The outcome of the ritual is unpredictable because it depends on the exact configuration of the Empire at the point where the ritual is cast, and that keeps changing. In the language of the net of the heavens, if you change a single node in the net, then it changes the whole net. In effect, you're casting the same ritual on a different empire, so you get a different outcome. Hence the unpredictability of the ritual. That would seem to present a somewhat irresolvable challenge. The Empire is made up of 1 million living, breathing beings. It's hardly going to remain still for 3 months while an enchantment runs its course. However, the Turning Mirror is confident that very small changes are fine. After all, it doesn't really matter if people breathe or not. Well, not to Synakenon, leastways. It's the big changes, the significant alterations to the net, that are the problem. All the Empire needs to do to perfect the Omnihedron is to stabilise the Empire and stop it changing. The Turning Mirror suggests that the Empire start by passing no new Senate motions, synod judgments or conclave declarations for a year, and accompany that with ensuring that no armies move anywhere during that time. Only once the Empire is brought to a position of perfect stillness would it be possible to eliminate the unpredictability of the Omnihedron rituals. Once that is accomplished, it would be possible for the Empire to make small but predictable changes to ensure steady and certain improvements. Even the stargazers who are most indifferent to imperial politics understand how ridiculous Synakenon's suggestions are. If the mystery of the Omnihedron is going to be solved, nobody imagines it will be by stopping all imperial activity for a year. Again, these suggestions tell the Empire much more about Synakenon than they reveal about the Omnihedron. However, the conversations are still somewhat useful. If the Turning Mirror is correct and one can only eliminate unpredictability and dissonance from the Omnihedron rituals by making the Empire completely unchanging, then maybe it is impossible to eliminate the negative consequences. What if the failure of previous generations of stargazers is because they are searching for something that simply cannot exist? A version of the Omnihedron with no flaws or drawbacks. One Wintermark runesmith compares it to the smith's art, pointing out that you don't make the perfect steel by eliminating all the impurities from the iron. Pure iron is surprisingly soft. It is the imperfections in the steel that make it hard. But if you make it too hard, it becomes brittle. The challenge facing a blacksmith is to add the right imperfections. What if the Omnihedron is not about creating the perfect ritual with no drawbacks, but rather about accepting the trade-offs and choosing the right benefits and flaws for the task at hand? Fortunately, Synakenon does have some more suggestions that are more practical. A new position. There are many conversations between the heralds of the Turning Mirror and imperial magicians over the Omnihedron, during which the Eternal becomes aware of the immediate threat of Cold Sun. This causes the heralds deep concern, though not for the subsequent attack on the Empire. They seem to consider the presence of thousands of scions of no great significance, being firmly of the view that the Empire will be victorious against them. Any incidental losses in the meantime will be recouped, simply given the passage of time, after all. Rather, what distresses them is the way in which they perceive that the Conclave discharged their responsibilities in the matter. The Conclave passed a declaration by Ariadne of Auric Horizon instructing imperial magicians to complete the Omnihedron, but then did not endorse the subsequent use of magic. The Apex Hyperion regards this as a catastrophic failure of hierarchy, one that damages every part of the Empire. Synakenon believes that an ordered realm requires that whatever power rules, it must always issue clear instructions. They see this as essential to ensure that those who carry out those instructions may do so faithfully and without fear of punishment. That latter point is particularly important. The Eternal's heralds are deeply agitated that individual magicians face punishment after apparently following the Conclave's will. They see this as a catastrophic outcome that permanently damages the authority of the Conclave, and constitutes a fundamental failure of loyalty by the Conclave towards those who follow its direction. To try to ensure that such an outcome could not happen again, Synekenon's heralds propose that the Imperial Senate create a new imperial title. They propose it be called something like the Overseer of the Omnihedron. They're not wedded to that name, but they do want to see something whose purpose is clear. Crucially, the title should be given the legal power to raise one declaration of endorsement each summit. That way, every magician will know whose responsibility it is to decide what enchantments should be cast on the Empire, and once that decision has been approved by the Conclave, then anyone can attempt to enact it, safe in the knowledge that they are following instructions correctly, and do not risk destruction for doing so. The Turning Mirror's heralds are surprisingly emotive on this point. To that end, they are prepared to help the Empire in its battle against Cold Sun, if the Senate acts as they have asked and creates the title. If that happens, then for the following season, the Eternal will enhance the Empire's mana sites, so that they become more powerful when Carve the Crystal Guardian is cast on them. If the Senate creates the new Conclave position, any mana site targeted by the Day enchantment will receive a 7 rank bonus, rather than the normal 5, due to the ranks of Guardians being swelled by soldier heralds sent by the Eternal. It goes without saying that if the title is created, Synekenon will take a keen interest in their affairs. The Stork and the Key. Synekenon's view is that the Empire should focus all their efforts on casting day enchantments on the Empire, rather than suffer the consequences of using more flawed realms. It is, however, cognizant of the fact that most magicians they speak with remain convinced that any credible attempt to construct an omnihedron probably requires all 6 realms. However, whatever course they take to reach the omnihedron, the Empire would clearly benefit from having a college of magic specialised in day magic. That would allow magicians to research omnihedron day rituals, which would make casting them much cheaper and easier, and might help bring further insight into the problems. Having scoured the Empire, the Eternal's ministers claim to have identified the location currently best suited to the creation of a new college of day magic. Sunspire in Morrow watches the forests of Theranin, guarding the territory against incursions from the Spring Realm. According to the Apex Hyperion, the Stork and the Key are not in conjunction, but their current temporal alignment mean they are both dominant over the Sunspire at the same time, and will be for the next year. As a result, the Empire would find it easier to build a college of magic here, provided it took advantage of the alignment by being specialised in day magic. Of course, easier is a relative term. The college would still require 45 wains of mithril, 45 wains of white granite, 60 wains of weirwood, and 450 crowns, to say nothing of the ongoing upkeep. If the Empire does build a college of day magic in the next year, at Sunspire or anywhere for that matter, then the Eternal promises to endow the Dean of the college with a boon, providing them with a single sunlight orb each summer, an ever-turning wheel that functions in a manner similar to a web of celestial attunement. Other realms. If the Empire is absolutely dead set on the idea of casting rituals of other realms, then the heralds of the Turning Mirror point out that they really ought to create a college of magic for each realm. The Icy Crag of the Eternal Sun is specialised in the research of summer rituals. While the Heliopticon helps the people of Urizen research any magic, and indeed is currently engaged in the codification of an imperial enchantment, it can only work on one ritual at a time, and the ministers have no doubt that its patron will increasingly exert influence to encourage the Doyen of the Spires to favour autumn magic. The Lyceum is currently in the hands of the Grendel, representing a further narrowing of opportunity. Synekenon has identified the perfect location for a college of day magic But that still leaves 2 other realms, 3 if you count night magic. It is beyond the ability of the Turning Mirror to know where magic of the other realms is strongest, but there is one power in day that knows where everything is. Or almost everything, certainly. Or everything that is worth knowing, definitely. Even Synekenon is not quite sure on the limits of She Who Watches, but the Eternal is certain that the unblinking eye would know where the perfect location to build a college of magic was to be found. Of course, speaking with She Who Watches is not straightforward, but the Empire already possesses the means to contact any of the Day Eternals. The Archmage of Day could use their power of plenipotentiary to ask Chemus to find the best site to locate a college of magic specialised in spring, winter or night magic. With some care, they might even be able to use their plenipotentiary to elucidate what they meant by best. Once they had that information, Imperial prognosticators could easily assess the sites and provide the kind of information the Empire would need to make a decision on the matter, as they've just done with the Sunspire. Dissenting voices. It has not escaped the notice of the other realms that the Empire is engaged in earnestly discussing the Omnihedron with Turning Mirror. A number of Eternals are clearly piqued, either irritated by or curious about the discussion. More than one report meetings with 3 very distinct heralds, the almighty Panjandrum, the fleeting Beat, and Grimcrow. The almighty Panjandrum. The almighty Panjandrum is a curious figure, with a tall body that seems at odds with their surprisingly small head and arms. They dress in Dornish style, wearing a long, rich hooperland of midnight blue and carrying a blackwood staff that helps with their rather awkward gait. They are definitely not a very important herald of Sodogua, a fact the Panjandrum is at great pains to stress. The Toad King is absolutely furious with the Empire and has forbidden his heralds from rendering any aid to Imperial magicians at all. Those that do face spending the rest of eternity being slowly digested in the Worm King's belly. However, it has not escaped the notice of the Night Realm that the Conclave has elected to consult with Eyebiter on the matter of the Omnihedron, and it pains many in the true realm of magic to imagine the enlightened minds of the Empire being blinded by the entirely vacuous illumination that spills out of the mouth of infinity. In the interests of ensuring that the incandescent mote does not entirely burn the spark of imagination from the Empire's minds, the almighty Panjandrum has appeared to dispense some prismatic insight. There is a lot more of this sort of laboured language. The almighty Panjandrum may be many things, but terse or humble are not amongst them. It seems to have a habit of contradicting itself. However, those magicians who do manage to tolerate their circumlocutions do glean a few potentially useful insights. It's not that the herald actually seems to know that much about magic, but in the constant stream of chatter there are questions and statements that seem to almost make sense. In the view of the Master of Magic, almighty Panjandrum, the idea of using only one realm is idiotic. The one piece of advice that the Turning Mirror has dispensed that the Panjandrum doesn't poo-poo is the idea that magic is inherently unpredictable. But rather than see that as a flaw, the herald presents it as a feature of magic. Enchantments on the scale of the Empire are unpredictable, but that brings benefits as well as problems. When the Empire cast Bright Eyes Gleam in the Depths, it inspired new ways to think about mana sites, revealed rare magical stones, created unique eye stones, and a whole raft of other benefits. Of course, it's a problem that it also discouraged art, but on balance, the Empire came out ahead. The Panjandrum argues that if massive Empire-wide magic really is as unpredictable as Eyebiter claims, then how can there possibly be a single formulation of rituals that work consistently every time? If you can't know what is going to happen, how can you know what ritual to perform next? You can't build a wall with odd-shaped stones, unless it's a dry stone wall, or you use mortar. But if you don't know what shape your stone is, how can you balance a stone on top of it? In the view of the Panjandrum, The Empire should develop as many different Empire-wide enchantments as they can. Rather than try to work out the right sequence, they should judge which ritual to cast next based on whatever effects the last one had. If the Empire changes, then the sequence will change. And since the Empire is always changing... The Panjandrum is at pains to stress that he cannot actively help the Empire with any of this at the moment, but he is absolutely certain that the Brother of Wizards is just itching to help. Once the Empire has found a way to placate the Lobosloth's anger over the theft of his domain, then he is certain to want to help. Fleeting Beat. Fleeting Beat is almost a skeleton, with sallow parchment skin barely covering their bones. They are swathed in robes the colour of desert sands at night, and their crystal eyes are mismatched spheres of midnight black and balefully glowing red. They are mostly interested in speaking to magicians versed in winter lore, on behalf of their dreadful lord, Sorin. The hungry wolf has little patience or sympathy for the Imperial Conclave. "The price sets the worth," whispers Fleeting Beat in its raspy voice. "What is bought too cheaply is held too lightly. It is cost alone that gives meaning." The Imperial enchantments provide many benefits, and those benefits are bought with the dissonances that cause so much trouble. Attempts to refine these so-called omnihedron rituals to try and avoid the dissonance can only lead to a situation where the rituals themselves become worthless, their boons negated by the misplaced urge to remove the costs. "It is fine for a child to wish for a world without suffering," says the herald, "but every general knows you cannot win a war without loss." In the judgment of Fleeting Beat, the Conclave has erred by listening to the cries of those harmed by the recent magics. They must harden their hearts and accept that some will be harmed by Imperial enchantment. What concern is it of the Conclave if farm owners are unable to preserve their crops, or artists receive no patronage? Their suffering will teach them an important lesson. The world is hard, after all. Crucially, there is no way to access such power without paying a price. The best the Empire might hope to achieve is for the Conclave to find ways to spread that burden, so that life's misfortunes fall on the wealthy and the poor alike. Grimcrow. The final herald who expresses an interest in the Omnihedron is a creature named Grimcrow that emerges from a regio in Mikarova and wanders seemingly at random along the Empire's roads. It resembles little so much as a great mass of sticks, feathers and bones bundled together haphazardly into the rough shape of a person, with the eyeless skull of a great corvid wedged atop it. It engages in conversation with anyone who wishes to talk to it, especially children, and offers a counter-argument to all this talk of how and when to perform the Omnihedron, and simply asks, "What is the wisest course of action?" If the problem with the Omnihedron is that the disadvantages and dissonances are unpredictable and build on one another unpalatably, then there are two obvious courses of action, or so Wise Rangara's herald claims. Instead of allowing the power to build and build, create intentional gaps in the structure of the Omnihedron, leaving one or more seasons between each ritual casting to let the garden recover its strength, to use a herbalist's metaphor. Better yet, use them only when they are actually needed, not just because you can cast them. Or, alternatively, consider the possibility that the Omnihedron is a bad idea, and that the Conclave has already chosen the wisest course of action. Don't cast these rituals and find other ways to use magic to help the Empire. But at the end of the day, regardless of what the Conclave decides, the important thing is that people learn from what they do. What have the Empire's magicians learned from this attempt to build the Omnihedron?